we have had this the third Ignatius Musazi lecture, memorial lecture, because the first one we talked about tracing the journey for the revival of the cooperative movement. The second one last year, we talked about IKE's role in helping organize the cooperative movement. This year's role goes back a bit to what Musazi's life was about. As a person who was from royalty, he went for studies in the UK, did well in his study, but was advised that because he was an African, he could not be ordained as a priest there. He need to come back to do it here. When he came back to do it here, he was told, don't you know you're an African? You should be a catechist in Bishop Taka Theological College in Mukono. So and from that point, when you listen to more stories, he says he got to become learn Ugandan nationalism and Pan-Africanism from when he met Kabalega and Mwanga in his father's house. When they were arrested, now they were fugitives, arrested and on the way to the Seychelles. They were kept for a few days in his father's house. And listening to what those people were talking among themselves, that if they had not been fighting among themselves, they would have dealt with the British problem. And now they were prisoners together. He said he learned that thing and said, oh my God. So I learned this from another friend recently. That was a very interesting experience. And then this person comes here. He leaves that priestly job, becomes a teacher in King's College, Budu, where he met and taught Frederick Mutesa, who later became the Kabaka of Uganda. Then he leaves that place and becomes an inspector of schools. And he does work as inspector of schools. As inspector of schools, he gets difficulties going somewhere in photo site, and engages some difficulty on the way. I don't want to talk about more of it, it will come later. Then while he's there, he asks this boss, I use a motorcycle, it's long distance, dangerous. Why don't we give me the car and you use the motorcycle here and I go? And then the man says, the Africans don't use the car. You should be using the motorcycle. What am I trying to say? This is a man who looked for social justice. He looked for justice all the time. He mobilized our people to look for justice in trade, justice in trade workers' crops. He helped us organize, but there was something more important. After that experience in Western Uganda, he left that job and he joined the cooperatives. Now, that is why this discussion. The IK Musazi Memorial Lecture 2018 is from the ivory tower where we are to the people. A challenge to Uganda's intelligentsia today. How many of us, Uganda's intelligentsia, have been to many universities, including this big Makerere University, would be willing to leave their comfort jobs of CEO of Uhuru Institute, permanent secretaries, ministers, and professors, and go down to the countryside and join cooperatives and mobilize the whole country, and something you do which has become independent as a country? Isn't that something to be proud of? That is why we are discussing Ignatius Musazi, because that spirit is a spirit that will always drive cooperatives. That is why I think, and we think it is so important to always reflect on IK Musazi's role and unique spirit he used to shape us into this point. Charles, I cannot talk anymore. I think the best is to invite those who are able to do it better to go ahead and do it. Thank you very much, Charles. You're welcome, all of you.
Thank you very much, Leonard, for giving us that brief insight. Amidst us here, we have the daughter of Ignatius Musazi, Elizabeth Musazi. You're most welcome. Thank you for being with us. I've been made to understand, I need to inform you that we're actually live. We're running live on NTV. So may I request that movements are limited so that we are not crossing those camera images. We have an audience that is not with us here. We have a very active online audience as well. You can see the Twitter feed. There people are tweeting about this. I understand we have the State Minister with us. Is he still? Yeah, should be coming to give brief opening remarks, and then we should be able to launch into the keynote presentation. I need to be advised, if the Minister is not yet ready, whether we launch and then he can do the opening remarks. later. In that case, may I invite Mwambusi Ndebesa. He doesn't need a lot of introduction. People think we are very close relatives. Maybe we are, because our names are almost the same. Mr. Ndebesa, I see on the program you've been given 45 minutes, but I would like to request that you give us a punchy keynote presentation in less time so that we're able to claw back on the time that we have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Invited the participants, ladies and gentlemen. I am told I'm supposed to be a keynote speaker, and again they are limiting my time. I don't know about that. You will see how to do the impossible in such a short time. Nevertheless, let's try to do what we can. I would have expected this hall to be full to capacity, but maybe people are on holidays or they are not interested in things like this. Topic: from Ivory Tower I have slightly changed it, from the Ivory Tower to the People's Cooperatives, a challenge to Uganda's intelligentsia today. That is our topic, and the structure of presentation is going to be like this: definition of key concepts, principles and values of cooperatives, assumed functions of cooperatives, assumed, those functions that have been given by scholars and development partners and governments, types of cooperatives, brief history of cooperatives in Uganda, the challenge of cooperatives, the potential of intelligentsia in promoting cooperatives, the intelligentsia as a problem, cooperatives as an alternative to the state and the market, and what I have called Musazism, the legacy of Musazi to the intelligentsia. I will be hurrying through some because I am told this morning there was a discussion on cooperatives, so like functions and objectives and values, I think they were covered this morning, so I will just pass through and then go to the gist of my presentation. But we may need to know what is a cooperative as a concept. The International Cooperative Alliance defines a cooperative as an autonomous association of persons united voluntarily to meet their economic, social, and cultural needs and aspirations through a jointly owned and democratic controlled enterprise. We have to distinguish between cooperatives and corporations. So we have to move ahead knowing that the two might be having some overlaps, but they are also different. Now, in our topic, there is Ivory Tower. If you go to the Bible, there is even Ivory Tower. I don't know whether in Ecclesiastes or Proverbs, but we are going to use Ivory Tower as it is used commonly to refer to the university and the intellectuals. It is a state of privileged seclusion or separation from the facts and practicalities of the day-to-day realities of the world. An attitude of aloofness from or disdain or disregard for worldly or practical affairs. So in this case, it is used negatively. Ivory Tower, not the positive one which we normally attribute it to. And intelligentsia, or what Gramsci, the Marxist Italian intellectual, calls organic intellectuals. The concept intelligentsia is of Russian origin. In simple terms, the intelligentsia is a class of intellectuals who are publicly engaged. And as I pointed out, Gramsci calls it organic intellectuals. It refers to those who are intellectual workers, such as professors, teachers, consultants, professionals, priests, etc. However, the slight difference between intellectuals and intelligentsia is that the former are academic intellectuals, while the latter are public intellectuals, or the latter combine both academic and public engagement. In other words, you could have academic intellectuals who isolate themselves in the ivory tower and pursue knowledge for its own sake without taking knowledge to the people or applying knowledge in the public. Those are academic intellectuals, as opposed to public intellectuals who are likely to research, generate knowledge, but also engage the public to disseminate the knowledge that they have acquired through their academic work. Principles and values of cooperatives. Cooperatives are built on principles. That's why they are different from the principles and values of the corporates. Voluntary, democratic control, economic participation for all members, autonomy or independence from other social groups, but they carry out education, they carry out training, they carry out information. But cooperatives are also supposed to cooperate amongst themselves. The cooperative societies are supposed to link up with each other. Primary cooperatives, they are supposed to link up with each other, but they are also supposed to link up with the unions. Unions are supposed to link up with the federations or confederations at the national level, or now we are talking about East Africa at the East African level. The businesses, the corporations just want to compete, not to cooperate. That is the slight difference. Other defining characteristics: a cooperative is an economic enterprise but with social goals. You get that? Economic enterprise with social goals. And cooperatives value things such as solidarity, and they are supposed to be socially rooted. They are supposed to promote inclusive development, which is now talked about by the Sustainable Development Goals. They are supposed to promote socio-economic justice. They are not Darwinists. You know, the theory of Darwin, or Darwin, struggle for the fittest? No. For them, they don't want to leave anybody behind. And they have dualism, they have dual roles, as I have already pointed out. They combine economic development goals and social justice or social emancipation goals. That makes them slightly different from corporations which only pursue development and mainly for profit maximization, but the cooperatives do also look at welfare maximization, and that makes the difference. Assumed functions, theoretically that is, they are supposed to promote, they are supposed to pull together and have the membership access markets, access finance, credit, inputs, information, etc. They are also supposed to make the membership at least acquire or adapt or adopt technology, and they are involved in extension services. They are also supposed to facilitate transport, storing produce, quality control function, etc. But they also have a social function. They can be sources of employment, they can provide health and insurance, they promote solidarity and social capital to their membership and the community generally. But they also have a political function. The politics we are talking about here is not state capture politics, going to state house or going to parliament. No, politics is contestation of power if you want, for various reasons. So they carry out advocacy on behalf of the general public and their membership. They also struggle for social justice in the community. Like now they would be talking about tax justice. There are also schools of democracy. Schools of democracy in the sense that cooperatives are supposed to be democratic, they are supposed to involve accountability, they are supposed to involve elections. All those attributes of democracy are supposed to be exercised in a cooperative. Hence, they are supposed to train their people in democratic practices from the grassroots up to the federation or confederation level. Therefore, cooperatives are training grounds for democracy, which is not necessary in corporations. types of cooperatives. There are very many types. In Uganda, we are used to growers and marketing cooperatives because they were the dominant, or they are still the dominant. Now we have added on the financial cooperatives, otherwise called SACCOs. But people can cooperate, they can put resources together for various reasons and in different sectors like fishing, transport, finance, mining, land buying, input supplies, consumer, dairy, housing, handcrafts, carpentry, beekeeping, village banks, import and exports, industrial cooperatives, etc. So nearly every economic and social sector can organize as a cooperative. I think we are together there. So if you thought it was only growers cooperatives and marketing cooperatives for coffee and cotton, no, they are much more than that. However, it has, these cooperatives have to register and be recognized legally. Are they still by the Register of Cooperatives? Does he register SACCOs? Because SACCOs are cooperatives, but in the financial sector. A brief history which you talked about this morning. 1913, the first cooperative, 1923, the largest, I think Uganda Coffee Growers Cooperative Association, 1933. Then the government legalized them, or they came up with an ordinance during the colonial period. Acts of Parliament were called the ordinances. Don't ask me, ask lawyers why they are called the ordinances, or why now LC 5 laws are called the ordinances, not acts. So in 1946, the state came in to regulate them. And since that time, there have been very many acts and laws to regulate, be careful here, to regulate the activities of cooperatives, but quite often this regulation has turned out to be institutional engineering. In other words, to co-opt cooperatives and bring them into the ambit of the state, and yet they are supposed to be autonomous. You hear the contradiction? Cooperatives that are supposed to be autonomous, but all these laws and acts and ordinances were meant to co-opt them and be made part of the state. That is where the problem began. In the the main function of cooperatives during the colonial period was actually a struggle for justice, not marketing. Marketing was secondary. The first one was economic justice. In the 60s, they were involved in marketing produce and development. And since the 90s, especially the finance cooperatives, they are giving out credit. Challenges of cooperatives. I think that's where the gist of my presentation is partly going to be. You know they have declined, or they started declining in the 1970s, 80s. Now we only know them maybe by SACCOs, but they are still there, but not as vibrant as they used to be. So what happened? Why aren't they vibrant as they used to be? The challenges are mainly three: organizational, political interference, this institutional engineering, and weak values or culture of solidarity. Organizational cooperatives have performed poorly because of elite capture. They have been captured by the elites, the elites in the rural areas, in the urban centers, and in the middle unions. The elites in those areas, the gatekeepers of power, have captured the cooperatives. And instead of being people's organizations and agencies, they have become agents of the elites. They have lacked economic control, democratic economic control, thus leading to inefficiency, corruption, and mismanagement. Then the other one is political interference. State capture, if you want. The state has captured them in the name of regulating them. Cooperatives have been institutionally engineered by the state and used as vehicles for political patronage by all the post-independence governments. But even the first ordinances, the ordinances during the colonial period, was meant to capture them and not to leave them as autonomous organizations, lest they organize politically for justice, and the state seems to be anti-justice and has tried to co-opt them, and when they have refused, it has either beaten them. Musazi was arrested and imprisoned 37 times because he wanted justice. You can see the state, and he rejected that. We are going to see it, that cooptation. Weak solidarity values. Cooperatives have not cooperated strongly, especially at the national level. They lack the bridging and linking social capital. Those of you who know social capital, norms of solidarity to resist elite capture and institutional engineering by the state are still very weak. That explains partly why they have weakened. Potential of intelligentsia in promoting cooperatives. Because the topic for today is the intelligentsia. The intellectuals have the knowledge and organizational skills, at least potentially. They have extensive exposure and linkages. I mean, they can link at the national level, they can link at the regional level, they can link internationally. They have that advantage of knowing where cooperatives can link and can cooperate, and the procedures and processes. That is the potential advantage of the intelligentsia. They have potential legitimacy for leadership. I mean, when you are an intellectual or a member of the intelligentsia and you go out there and you meet the average citizens, there is a way they look at you as somebody who is knowledgeable, who has skills, who has education. The potential is there. If, by the way, you are not planning to capture them. They have capacity for advocacy and engagement. Yes, the members of the intelligentsia. You can imagine getting into advocacy and you meet these MPs and ministers and these other big people and international partners. And I mean, when you are an ordinary citizen, first of all, the language will keep you off. The concepts will keep you off. The confidence, you will not have it. But now, if they met a member of the intelligentsia, why should he start quaking because there is a minister or an MP or even a president or whoever? So they have that legitimacy. They have the ideas, sure. As a class of the intelligentsia, they have the capacity agency in socio-economic transformation. They have the potential to resist social engineering from the state. You get me there? You got social engineering, yeah? You just come to a member of the intelligentsia class and you start lying to them that power belongs to you. He will start saying, wait a minute, where is that power that belongs to me? It is very clear in the Constitution. Is it very clear? Yes, it is written there clearly, but is it practiced? An ordinary citizen may not have the capacity to see beyond and say, I think power was captured. It is in the Constitution clear, but in practice, it is the power belongs to somebody. They have that potential. In some respects, where they have actively participated in mobilizing and participating in cooperative work, they have been a problem rather than a solution. So the intelligentsia can be a solution and a problem at the same time. They have contributed to the poor performance of cooperatives because of elite capture. They know books of accounts. They know how to calculate. They will confuse cooperative members and calculate very fast before they know it. They will, when you question them in a cooperative meeting, they will turn around and say, by the way, it is you who is supposed to pay me. You see, they add up, they add 1 plus 2, and then they use base 2 before the members know it. He can say, by the way, you owe me something. You can see I even calculated badly. So they have the potential to rebellate, but the potential also to oppress. So they are a double-edged sword. They have sought to enrich themselves at times at the expense of membership. From another perspective, the intellectuals have shunned participation in cooperatives and other citizens' organizations. But there are some members of the intelligentsia who mind their own business. They don't mind about the suffering of the masses. They don't mind about social injustice. For them, it is for God and my stomach. They are that category of intellectuals at universities, as teachers, as priests, as professionals, as consultants, and other intellectual workers. Some intellectuals exhibit elitism, this ivory tower seeing mentality, and do not want to identify with the masses. They just want to put on glasses, put on black coats, put on ties. If they are ladies, heeled shoes, go around speaking English through the nose, pretending to speak it better, when actually they are murdering it. They cannot speak vernacular, actually, even when they are among people who do not know English, because they want to be distinguished from the rest, because they speak English. They are those. And it has been a problem. They lack the public spirit. There are very many intellectuals or members of the intelligentsia who do not have public spirit. It is for themselves. And live off ideas, consultants, researchers, teachers, they live off the ideas rather than living for the ideas and beliefs they hold. Do intellectuals live for the ideas they hold and they are ready to sacrifice like Musazi? We are coming to that. Some have remained pure academic intellectuals. They are not engaged intellectuals. Some have betrayed the cause of social emancipation and joined the exploiting classes. They have been part and parcel of the exploiters and oppressors and other hunger zone. Cooperatives as alternative to sales and market. I will not spend much time here. This is a subject for another debate. In the 60s, you know, it was state-led. Since the 1980s, it is market-led. But it seems both the state-led and market-led have not done fairly well. Therefore, can we think of alternatives, and the alternative being the cooperative? Because the state-led led to mismanagement, corruption, patronage, inflation, which led to inflation shortages and economic decline. The market-led, which was introduced in the 1980s, supposedly to bring efficiency, it has led to unequal development, foreignization of the economy, unemployment, desaturated structures, Chiwani economy, that is an ethical economy. You know that Chiwani. We now are running a Chiwani economy. People are chasing lines. Chasing lines. Bagoba line. That is the economy we have now. Kugoba line. Chiwani economy. Unethical economy. When you are going to buy something, you are likely to buy substandard, and somebody will be lying to you, and you have no state to support you through regulation. Quality control. The cooperatives used to have quality control. Quality control has been thrown overboard. So cooperatives could be an alternative. You know, all these, Uganda is still an LDC. Many people don't know Uganda is an LDC. And they are saying we are going to be a middle income country in 2020, 2 years from now. Less than 2 years from now, we are around $700 US per capita income. And the total economy is about 28 billion US. Surely to be a middle income country, which is around $1,200, a miracle is still happening. Unemployment is high. There is economic exclusion. The majority are controlling the economy. So the cooperative model has the potential to address both the state and market failures. The cooperative model has the potential to lift more people out of poverty through increased production and productivity and economic inclusion. Simultaneously, the cooperative as an alternative has the potential to integrate and build communities from below, which the state and the market have failed to achieve. We need national integration in Uganda. You know it? You know Uganda is a mere geographic expression? How many people relate as Ugandans really? Or we relate as tribes, as different regions, as different religions, as different this. When a calamity befalls one region, you say, let them have it also. When it is somewhere, you say, I don't mind. How do we build a community now in Uganda? Cooperatives, actually, we are building communities before they decline. Because you'd have primary cooperatives at the village level, then unions at the district level, then unions would have the national unions of federation, and they would have a confederation where people would meet and build communities. Cooperatives are agents of both development and social emancipation. But corporates, on the other hand, these other investors and corporates are agents of development only for the few. They are Darwinists. The cooperative model also has a potential to build an independent, integrated, self-sustaining national economy. You remember that statement of the 10-point program? An integrated, self-sustaining, independent national economy in the 10 commandments. Where did they go, by the way? You remember they have been forgotten. Although this statement, by the way, was not from Ruwer. I know I'm a graduate of University of Dar es Salaam, and we used to use this concept, which was developed by Clive Thomas, who was an East German intellectual, economic lecturer at the University of Dar es Salaam, and Rugweya Mamu, who was an economic advisor of Nyerere in Tanzania. They are the ones who used this expression, an integrated, self-sustaining national economy. Rugweya Mamu, in his book, Pervasive Industrialization. You can go and read it. I can even give you the page where the expression was got. But it's a good one. I'm not saying it is not good, but I'm not saying it came from Ruwer. That's what I'm saying. But it is a good one. And cooperatives can promote this one, isn't it? This is because the goal of cooperatives is not profit maximization, but development plus welfare, and the general good of the greater majority. The cooperatives pursue what is called normative economics. Finally, somehow, let me talk about Musazism, the concept I am coining to refer to the philosophy of Musazi, or the values or norms of Musazi. Musazism, i.e. the norms, values, behavior, and practices of I.K. Musazi, who is buried as a hero at Kororo grounds. Musazi was born from a landed aristocratic family. His father had a lot of land, Milo land, and was highly educated according to the standards of the day. He had almost completed all the education in Uganda. At that time, in 1930s, he was very educated. He was an intellectual and a member of the intelligentsia. However, he decided to do what America Cabral called committing class suicide, and came from the ivory tower to identify with the masses. You get that? From the ivory tower to the masses. That was Musazi, who, by the time he joined the cooperative movement, was an education officer, I think an inspector of schools. And by that time, that was a very big person in the standards of the day. But he decided to leave the job and identify with the masses, thus committing class suicide. However, Musazi moved from ivory tower to the grassroots farmers to organize them for social justice. He also transcended tribalism. You know, don't think that because you are educated that you won't be tribalistic. Here in Makerere, when they are voting, they have what they call clan soccer. And most of the organizations here are Basogansete, I don't know, Banyankore Kweterana, I don't know, Nkowazambogo, I don't know what and what. They have failed to transcend their tribal alliances. We hardly have trans-tribal organizations, even at the university. But Musazi transcended tribalism when he moved from his native Uganda to go and organize peasant farmers in Teso, in Lango, Acholi, and elsewhere. When you read his biography, you'll find that he was actually organizing people in Acholi, in Lango, in Teso, and other parts of Uganda. He also transcended territorialism and went to Kenya to forge alliances with Kenyatta and other Mau Mau fighters to fight for economic and political justice. He normally used to go to Kenya. I see my son going around. I hope not to muzzle my mouth. I'm joking. Musazi did not live off ideas, but lived for his ideas. Musazi did not sleep on his tongue, but told truth to power. This expression, I'm borrowing it from Runyankore, Ruchiga, Rohororo. Sleeping on the tongue. Abanyankore se ngo nyine kakwa kubyamira urimi nyina ni byamire shabo. When the head of the family does not talk in the homestead, the calves at night will sleep in their urine. Yeah? He has to talk and say, hey, but the calves' pen has not been cleared. Now, if you, the members of the intelligentsia, but are they there anyway? I don't know whether they have come here. You can see they are living off ideas, not living by their ideas. But the few who are here and those who can get this message is that don't sleep on your tongue. Otherwise, Uganda will sleep in urine, in cow urine. The intelligentsia class must come out of their relative obscurity, to use Franz Fanon words, and seek to shape and determine the history and destiny of society and the country. Do you know that expression of Franz Fanon? That every generation must come out of obscurity, define its mission, fulfill it, or betray it. Have you read it? If you have not, go and Google it tonight. That is if they didn't remove you using the social media tax. So I am using Fanon, that the intelligentsia should also come out of their obscurity and shape the issues of the day, or they will be shaped. You can imagine intelligentsia to be shaped, to be sorted out. The members of the intelligentsia. It is betraying their class as intelligentsia, the cream of the country, people with ideas, people with knowledge, people who have got skills of and tactics of advocacy, and they are the ones who are being shaped around. They are being told where to go. They are socially engineered. Really, members of the intelligentsia to be socially engineered. And then you go around telling people in the village or Bufunda that you are a member of the intelligentsia, that you come from the ivory tower, when they are engineering you. That is unacceptable. The intelligentsia should walk in the footsteps of Musazi, commit class suicide, go and identify with the people, with the masses, to provide the needed non-opportunistic organizational leadership, which failed the cooperatives. If you are a member of the intelligentsia and you go and participate in these citizens organizations, even parents teachers organization, or board of governors, you have something to contribute. You can challenge the headmaster. An ordinary person, he can challenge the headmaster, he will start quoting the Education Service Act and other acts, and then the ordinary person will say, I think since the headmaster has said it, it must be true. But now, if you are a member of the intelligentsia, you can say, wait a minute, I know that act, or for that matter, you can challenge the act, because it is not cast in stone. So the members of the intelligentsia have the potential, but if they decide not to commit class suicide, and want to live off ideas, then things will go wrong, and then we shall be ourselves to blame. So the intelligentsia should transcend and shun tribalism, like Musazi, and parochialism, inward looking, in the footsteps of Musazi. The intelligentsia should seek to forge alliances with fellow East Africans to break down the mental borders to achieve citizen-led East African integration, not state-led East African integration. Mental borders are actually more stronger than the physical borders. You may write laws, treaties, the protocols to remove the borders between the different East African countries, but as long as the mental borders are still strong, you will not achieve East African integration. One day I was going to Arusha in an East African integration conference, and I forgot to put there how many days I would spend in Arusha. And the immigration lady brought it back. You have not put how many days you are going to stay in Tanzania. I said I'm going to Arusha. And Arusha is supposed to be the capital city of East Africa. If I overstay in Arusha, what will happen? She said, you will be prosecuted. I said, Bandang, how can I be prosecuted for overstaying in my capital city? You can see the mental borders. You can be prosecuted for overstaying in your capital city, Arusha. So, it is intellectuals who know one or two things about East African integration. I thought the minister would be here, and I would ask him to use the cooperative model to create an East African integration. The Business Council has got observer status in Arusha. Are the cooperatives there? And yet the cooperatives mobilize from the grassroots. Cooperatives, primary cooperatives at the Muruka or village level, then secondary cooperatives, then unions, then federations. Why don't we have an East African Confederation or Federation of Cooperatives with an observer status in Arusha. And through that cooperatives, we can integrate East Africa, because most of the people in East Africa are agrarian or peasant producers everywhere. And so through the cooperative model, it can be easier to integrate East Africa than the business model, because the business people are fewer. You get me? So how can the cooperative model be used as an instrument for East African integration? I submit that those who are in charge of the process of East African integration look at the cooperative model to create East African integration. That is when it will be a people's federation and a people's model, a citizens' model integration. But this business of saying it is going to be led, there is that principle where they say it will. Honorable Kanyomozi was a member there. I don't know whether you participated in that treaty thing or protocol thing. Private sector led. How can the private sector led integration? Private sector is selfish. It is selfish, you know that. They are opportunistic. They will be pursuing their profit maximization, not integration, not community building. But even now, it is state-led. It is not private sector-led. How can we have citizen-led? We can have citizen-led when we have got organization infrastructure through cooperatives. A primary cooperatives linking with unions, unions linking with federations, federations linking with confederations within the region. We shall facilitate East African political integration faster through cooperatives than through the business model. You get me? But you can challenge me if you so wish. But I think the cooperative model would create East African integration more than the other organizations. The intelligentsia, like Musazi, should shift from being purely academic intellectuals to combine it with being public intellectuals and speak the truth to power. Have you heard that? Are you ready to speak the truth to power? Are you going to avoid co-optation? Or you will play it safe and say, let so and so talk, let others talk, let others write. Have you talked? What about you? Things are going the other way, but you are waiting for somebody else to talk. Intellectuals should also be public intellectuals. Can I finish with a quotation from Martin Luther King Jr.? And I quote, he says, "Our lives begin to end the moment we keep silent on things that matter." I repeat, our lives begin to end the moment we keep silent on things that matter. Asante sana.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Mwambusi and Devesa, for that very exhaustive and deep keynote presentation. I think you're giving us a lot to chew on. I wouldn't like to summarize, because that would be to attempt to duplicate what you have already done, and we've been listening in. You referred to, I saw you talk to Yona. Yona is a former minister for cooperatives. So some people call him the grandfather of cooperatives, but Musazi was there before him, so maybe we'll share from him at some stage. May I, at this moment, ask, we're going to have a very, very brief discussion. We have two discussants. So we're going to have a discussion on the women's role in the cooperative movement in Uganda from Irene Ovonji Odida. She is a former member of the East African Legislative Assembly. She is currently the Chief Executive Officer of FIDA. You're most welcome.
Good afternoon. Sorry, I wasn't aware I was asked to talk about the women's role. I'll come to it, but I think I'll just talk about citizens' role, because I think women were also citizens. I want to thank, I still call you Professor. I'd like to thank Professor Ndebesa because he has really demystified this topic for all of us. And as I was listening, I was thinking I might not be the best discusser because basically I agree with everything that he has said. I think we should give him another hand of applause. Thanks. I'm just going to try and add some dimension to this, just really add into what he has said because I don't want to detract from anything. He mentioned that cooperatives are meant for social and economic purposes. But we know that in the system we have today, in Uganda, and I think in many other countries as well, things are not working for the majority of people. So for most people, the economic goals, personal development, income are not working out. And I'm sure that's true for many of you here as well, or at least for your parents. The social ones also don't seem to be working. If you look at what's happening in our society, we have so many things happening. I'm sure you followed the march on Saturday, the Women's March, about the murders, the kidnaps, the rapes happening to women in this country. So socially, we have a serious problem as well. I was in a meeting sometime last year at the UN to something relating to illicit financial flows, talk about the SDGs and so on. And one of the things I said, which I think is relevant to us here as well, is that the system isn't broken. Because many people say, the system is broken, how do you fix the system? I said the system is not broken. It was built that way. The system is developing, it is delivering what it was intended to deliver. So this inequality that we have, the disparities and so on, the way the state is functioning, the way the market functions, is delivering what it was built to do. I think we need to disabuse ourselves of the notion that it's broken. That is what it was designed to deliver, and that is what it is doing. So the task that we have is a bigger one. It's not to tinker with the system and try to shift it. It's to recreate systems, recreate the nation, recreate the state. Because it's delivering what it was intended to. That is why successive governments, doesn't matter whether you talk about the colonial government, or you come to and talk to the current government, doesn't matter. They deliver the same thing. That's what it was intended to deliver. Cooperatives are meant to build for the membership. For the members are supposed to, at the end of the day, to have personal wealth and their communities and the country that they come from. But you look at Africa, Uganda inclusive, and we see that a continent that is resource rich is still seen as the poorest continent. Whatever indicators you talk about, this morning I was at one of the UN agencies talking to staff, just talking to their staff. And I asked them, are you delivering anything? If you look at the mandate of your agency, are you really delivering? Because I don't see the change. So resources, huge resources, from agriculture to everything else. I think majority of the cooperatives we have here are. But I think we need to change the narrative. And this is where the issue of concepts that you're talking about comes in. We need to stop talking about poverty. It's not poverty. What we have is impoverishment. There's a difference. Not poverty. Poverty is just a state. It's a condition. We have impoverishment. So something is being done actively to create poverty for some, for a majority, and wealth for a minority. That is impoverishment. A lot of people who are, for many times, I'm part of civil society, I've been part of the East African Parliament and different things. But when you have discussions on these things in civil society, many actors, NGOs, say we're not political. Even this morning I was told, by those guys from the UN, we're not political. All the things you've talked about, a lot of it is politics, but us, we're not political. I told them everything is politics. You can say that you're not partisan, but you cannot say you're not political. Because it is politics that decides whether to tax your social media and not tax MPs and ministers. It's a decision made. We need more money. Where should the money come from? Let it come from the pockets of the poor, but the rich will not pay tax. It's a decision. That's politics. So let's not disabuse ourselves at politics. There's politics in everything, including within the cooperatives and with all these formations that we come to together as human beings. So we need to begin to understand the system if we want to dismantle it, and understand the task is about dismantling, not just tinkering. So it's a systemic issue. Now, on the issue of cooperatives, and still on concepts, I like that Dr. Debesa, you talked about development, that cooperatives are about development, because the talk for too many years now has been about growth. And intellectuals, intelligentsia have bought into that. We all talk about growth, economic growth. What does economic growth mean? By its very nature, that phrase is exclusionary. Do you understand that? Growth is about exclusion. So when we sing and talk about economic growth, we are singing for an economic development model that excludes the majority, based on the whole neoliberal concept. So we need to use language very carefully and understand what we are saying. So I do not like the language of growth. It is development, and that was dropped by the wayside as the neoliberal approach became dominant. And of course, we all know, I hope, that Uganda adopted it wholesale with the structural adjustment programs. The World Bank and all these others needed somewhere to experiment, and we said, we're here. Our doors are open. You can experiment on us. And they did, with the results that we've seen, including the killing of cooperatives. Now, one of the challenges I want to put to you, particularly those who are in cooperatives, is all these different institutions that we see have been co-opted. You touched on that. We work I'm from FIDE Uganda, and we work with some elements of the labor movement. Last year, we had a case, which was on the media, so I hope you're aware of it. It was not involving cooperatives, but it was involving workers in the flower sector. Women workers, actually, who had been exposed to chemicals in a flower farm in Mukono and Wakiso. Basically, the flower farm owners, it was a Dutch company, this is the private sector issue, Dutch company, they had sprayed their flowers every now and then, spray the soil, and then instead of waiting the days that they needed to wait before the workers could go in, they decided send in the workers to pick the flowers, because the flowers were ready, they don't want to lose that business. So the workers went in, all women, 20 went in for one of the greenhouses, got exposures, vomiting, collapsing, came out. Another 20 were sent in. They said, no, we can't go in or you lose your job. 20 more. By the end of the day, 88 had been exposed. Over 3 incidents, the total came to 179. So we got involved on that case. Tried to come in, provide some representation to them legally, get them help, get them to hospitals. We did all of that. And then in the course of that, the state got involved. About 3 weeks later, came in, tried to grab these women from the hospital where we had taken them to move them to Mulago. And we said, no, leave them where they are, where we know they'll get treatment and where we know we can still have access to them. So there was a big fight between us with the trade minister over that issue. So where does the state come in protecting women, protecting low cadre workers, protecting farmers, not the big ones, not the big farmers, the small ones, small and medium-sized, where most of the indigenous population are? Where do they come? Which side do they come on? Quite clearly, successively since the colonial time, the state has come out on the side of big business, the big farmers, and with these institutions have co-opted their leadership in order to prevent the capacity to organize and resist. And this is the same thing that is still going on. So for the cooperatives, the challenge which I put to you is, how do you ensure that you continue to own these structures once you set them up? Because your leaders will still come under pressure, as we have seen with these labor workers that we work with. The leadership comes under pressure. How do you protect, first of all, those who want to remain connected to the group they came from? When they get phone calls, as we saw in that case, saying we shall sort you out, what do you do about it? When they betray you, what do you do? Because you see, we have a very bad system in this country where we say we do not, you talked of talking truth to power. Ugandans don't talk truth to power for the most part. When you talk truth to power, they consider you to be uncultured. Isn't that the case? You're not cultured, you're badly behaved, you're not brought up, you're not respectful, all of that. Hold that pressure. You lose whatever social capital you might have had. So we don't challenge injustice. I loved it last year when, in the height of Toji Kwatako, citizens were calling ministers and MPs and picking red ribbons, tying on them and saying, tell us how you're going to vote. Are you going to vote for us or are you going to betray us? That was the citizens' power. But for us as a nation, we placed leaders up there, and then they become rulers, not leaders. Who is accountable? Is it the leaders accountable to the community, or the communities accountable to the leaders? Right now, it is the community. You must account. Why have you said this? Why did you speak like this? Now we are told we are doing Lugambo on the whatever, therefore we must pay tax on that thing. You must account for your time. So I loved what a woman, one of these women who was part of the march on Saturday, when she was on the 4th estate with Charles, and she said, why should we account for what I do? Why should I account for what I do on social media? If I want to use it for Lugambo, it's my time. So, as cooperators, you need to start holding your leaders to account and also protecting those who are good, those who remain representing the cooperatives. Because the cooptation is real. I have seen it. I've seen it with the labor movement. I have seen it with parliament. I have seen it with all categories of institutions, even go up to faith-based institutions. You see many where you can see co-opted bishops, co-opted this and that. Yes. So the social justice goals will not be met without challenging that. The other thing I just wanted to mention, 2, 3 things. The scope of cooperatives, all that you talked about, that is there. But even in other cases, you even see banks. I have a colleague from Italy who, he's a manager of a bank, a big bank, sort of village bank, proper big bank. And they have a banking cooperative. They have banking cooperatives there. So this is something that is not just about small, but right up to big. Yes, because those principles are about the collective good and using the power of numbers. So it can be taken right up to that sort of level. And then the 2 last things. Many times you find the fragmentation that you talked about. Fragmentation is quite often. We do have a very fragmented society, but it's fragmentation that is very deliberate. Whenever I see people crying for new districts, I'm asking, do they know what they are talking about? What use is it to you to have 3 districts which have no services, no money? What's the point? And do we appreciate, there's a time I went to a district, I won't mention the name, somewhere in the East. Years ago, we were doing some consultation on the East African Federation. And we went to this district. We almost drove through it without realizing we were in the district headquarters. Then we reversed and came back. It was a new district. Then they started talking. They had a whole very young lady, very intelligent, who was like the speaker, a young lady. Then she said, yes, this is this new district. We broke off from the other district. Reason, because we wanted to be able to have our district sessions in our own language. That was the rationale. So they broke off from the other one, which had also broken off from another one. The district cannot raise money. They cannot pay their staff. They cannot provide services. So these districts, how are they helping us with our development agenda as countries, as a country? Rather, they seem to have become tools to divide us ethnically, compared to Musazi. who was working in many different communities and was not looking at things as a Muganda, right? He was looking at himself as a Ugandan and as an East African. And in fact, going back to what our history shows us, that if you read, and the same thing I said to these people I was talking to this morning, I said, go and read the history of Africa, not the distorted history that we are taught in our schools. Read the true history which has been researched by the Afrocentrists, people like the late Sheikh Anta Diop, people like Benjamin Channon from Egypt, the black Egyptian, who talked about, went and researched. Diop, a Senegalese, mastered about 11 disciplines, including linguistics, history, archaeology, and so on, just so that he could use those disciplines to prove the true history of Africa. So read those books about the African origin of civilization, civilizational barbarism, where he was disputing the modern racist history, which completely negates the contributions that Africa made historically, thousands of years ago, that it was black Africans who built the pyramids and developed all the civilization that the Greeks went and borrowed. All those things we learn about Archimedes, they went and learned it in places like the University of Alexandria, where there were blacks, run in a country which was run by blacks. So that powerful history. But one of the things he talks about, how in the whole of Africa, there are only 5 communities. All the different groups came from 5 communities. And our ancestors knew it, which is why when Mwanga ran away from Uganda, when he was being chased by the British, he went and joined Kabalega, and they went to Lango, and they were given safe refuge. Why? Because they knew that historically they were either the same people, the Babito had founded all these kingdoms, or they had very close links, which were disrupted by the colonialists and their successors. So we need to go back to our true origin as a civilized people, as people who have generated knowledge, civilizations, who managed our societies and built wealth and cooperated around that. And know that those differences serve a global and imperial agenda. And cooperatives, I hope, can do that if those in them, including the leaders, understand some of these things and come from that system, from that perspective. And so even for us, NGOs, we need to remove these barriers. That is the other point I want to make. The fragmentation between different categories of organizing. We already have the public order law to separate us. Why should we add to that our own concepts to separate us further? We are all at the bottom of the heap in the greater scheme of things. So let us stop these small differences which are meaningless. I was talking to judges last year about illicit financial flows. I'm very interested in that issue. I won't talk about it now because of time, but it's really something I urge you, go online. You can get VPN, okay, and avoid that tax. You can get VPN. Yeah, go online and Google Mbeki, the Mbeki report. This is a report on illicit financial flows from Africa. Talks about why we are poor, what is going on in our country, in our continent, so that we begin to see some of these things of the big picture. What are the things, the structural things that we need to fight and challenge and change? But the issue for me is, without the right consciousness, understanding of who we are, of the fact that we came from a unified history and a history that achieved, because of that unity, because of knowing who we are and being rooted in our own consciousness, we were able to achieve so much. So the intelligentsia need to be part of that. Makerere, I'm part of the Makerere University community. I am the vice chair of the council. The only reason when I was approached about joining the council, the sole reason I accepted, because I'm a very busy person, I have 10,000 things I do. The sole reason I accepted was because of appreciating the potential capacity of academia to create a difference, to generate knowledge, to be thought generators, generate a new understanding and consciousness in this country. I have not yet seen it, although I'm so pleased that we have people like you. We need more. This hall should be full of our lecturers, should be full of our management, full of our students, because we're talking about our survival as a people. So cooperatives, if you can deepen your consciousness, you can't be that vehicle if you deepen your consciousness.
Thank you.
Change the accountabilities in this country. Change it so that it is the leaders who are accountable to the community first. So that we drop these false concepts of growth and move to development. So that we start talking of inclusion of all of us, whether you're Muslim, whatever it is, we recognize as a human being, you have value.
Thank you.
And that there's enough wealth for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Irene Ovonji-Odida, for that very, very insightful presentation, discussion of Professor Mombusi Ndebesa's paper. I still don't want to spoil. I've been looking around. I'm wondering if Dr. Simba Kayungasal is with us, the audience. Yes, sir. Could you kindly come and use a maximum of about 10 minutes? 10 minutes? I need to implore you because we will be losing live broadcast in about the next 30 minutes. So we need to be able to maximize the time and get some of the plenary discussions onto the live broadcast. So your 10 minutes start now, sir. And you're discussing for us the practice of attracting the elite into cooperatives. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, that is not what I was told to say. I'll just make a general comment on the cooperative movement in general and Ndebesa's presentation. When I looked 10 minutes, I think I'll try to do that in less time. When I looked at the audience, one thing which impresses me is the presence of young people. I think they're in secondary schools. So because of the presence of the young people, I'll adjust my presentation to fit them. So in order to adjust my presentation to fit them, before I go to two major critiques of Dr. Ndebesa's presentation and the cooperative movement in general, I'll just spend 2 minutes to give a profile of this man called Ignatius Musazi for the sake of our young generation. I want you to go home when you know who this man Musazi was. Because of time, I'm not going into the entire history. I will stop the profiling up the time, 1952, when he formed the Uganda National Congress. I'll not pick up the story from there, to be for another day. And of course, the formation of Uganda National Congress is a critique of what I've been hearing since morning, that cooperative movements are autonomous, they are apolitical. The formation of UNC was a critique of that thinking. In fact, if Musazi came and said cooperative movements should be apolitical, he would be very, very disappointed. Yeah, very, very disappointed. So I'll just give a critique in 2-3 minutes as well. Then I'll also give possibly party frustration or a way forward. So in short, as a way of profiling who is this man called Musazi for the young children of ours, Musazi was born in 1905 at a place called Timuna, Wobulenzi. He was son of Kangave, Kangave, Sada chief of Bulemezi. Between 1918 and 1924, he attended Mengo High School. We don't have children from Mengo High School. 1924 to 1927, he attended Trent College, Derbyshire. In fact, he went to UK to study as a priest. 1927 to 1930, he was at St. Augustine College, Canterbury. Much as he went to study as a priest, of course, those who teach religion, they say God created man and woman in his or her own image. We don't know whether he's a he or he's a she. So God created man and woman in his or her own image. But in spite of that, the religious practice at that time, there was clear preference of the white priests at the expense of the black priests. Musazi thought there was something wrong. If humanity was created in the name of, in the image of God, all human beings ought to be treated alike. There should be no discrimination according to race. That is one thing which dissuaded Musazi from pursuing the career of a priest because of discrimination in the house of God. He came back, taught at King's College Hudo, became an inspector of schools, which Mwembesa has mentioned. When he became an inspector of schools, it was not a position of privilege. In fact, this position enabled him to see a major injustice in our country. Inspector of schools, the African teachers were paid 5 times less than the Indian teachers and the white teachers. Musazi says, why? Why should a white and Indian teacher doing the same job be paid more than an African teacher? That is one of the frustration, annoyance, which made Musazi to think of organizing our people. So, of course, 1937, he formed the Peasant Farmers Voluntary Organization. 1938, together with Ruben Spartas Mukasa, they formed the Bana Bachintu. 1938 again, with James Kivu, they formed Uganda Motors Drivers Association. 1938 again, very critical year, we have to find out why, formed the Uganda Labour Party, the first political party. Though we normally argue that UN was the first political party was the Labour Party. 1940, 1941, he was imprisoned allegedly for forgery. The reasons I have the whole case, whatever documented, everything was faked up, but he was imprisoned for 2 years. Of course, 1945, there was an uprising, and because of that uprising, Musazi was deported to Moyo. Imagine being deported from one part of the country to another part of the country, and that's deportation. So that was the colonial project. 46, together with Bazongere, he was released from deportation. 1946, of course, Bataka Party was formed. It had its role it played. On the 2nd of April 1947, Uganda African Farmers Union was created. 1948 December, Musazi left the country to go to London. This trip to London was very critical. When he went to London, he linked up with the Fabian Socialist Movement. Among the people he linked up with was a gentleman, Fena Brockway. I'll have an opportunity to briefly talk about Fena Brockway before I conclude. He also visited constantly London School of Economics. And then, of course, there were a lot of other things. There was Semakula, but that is another story. 1951, Musazi decided to come back to Uganda at a time when the colonial state made it clear that upon his return he would be arrested. He said, Uganda is my country, I'm coming back. You arrest me, go ahead, but I'm coming back. He came back, was arrested. Quite important, when he came back, he formed the Federation of Partnership of Uganda African Farmers. Very important. Now, at this moment, I go to one or two critics. When he formed Federation of Partnership of Uganda African Farmers, but even before he returned, he had a conversation with Fema Brukwe. And Fema Brukwe told him, the issues around which you are organizing your people are economic. But you never get economic justice unless you capture political power. Go back. Through strength and Federation of Partnership of Uganda African Farmers Union, but translate it into a political organization to capture political power. So in short, distinction between politics and the cooperative movement, that you can have a political cooperative movement, you are wasting your time. A cooperative movement ought to be political. Without capturing power, there is very little you can do for your people. Now, two lessons as I come to conclusion. What lessons do we draw? Of course, with that advice, in 1952, Ignatius Musazi, together with several other people, they formed Uganda National Congress on a date which was also chosen very carefully to coincide with the struggle against apartheid in South Africa. And the name Congress was also chosen carefully because at that moment most of the organizations struggling for independence derived from Indian Congress Party had the Congress name. Black as a color was not chosen accidentally for the African consciousness. Red as a color for the party, not accidentally. A symbol of unity, irrespective of our race. All of us have the same color of blood. So that explained the red in UNC, the black in UNC, currently the red and black in UPC. What is the other lesson, apart from fusion of politics and the cooperative movement? Second lesson. And the second lesson, the cooperative movement is successful within a certain ideological framework. Cooperative movement is successful within a social democratic ideological framework. You are organizing a cooperative movement in a neoliberal ideological framework. We wish you luck. How do you organize? The fundamental question you should be asking, how do you organize a successful cooperative movement in a neoliberal economic framework? We had a cooperative bank. I'm told by the time it was sold, it was making profit because World Bank and IMF thought the cooperative bank was a symbol of social justice. Whether it was making profit or not, it did not fit within the new neoliberal framework, so it had to be sold. So for you in the cooperative movement, that is the fundamental question. How do you organize a successful cooperative movement in a neoliberal framework? So that's the second lesson. The third lesson, quite connected, and then I'll end up with a few of my frustrations. The third lesson, and this is not a lesson for the cooperative movement, but a lesson for the political class. In 2005, we took a decision to return Uganda to a multi-party dispensation. At one time, 39 parties get formed. As of now, we have 29 registered parties. What is the difference between the parties we have now and Uganda National Congress as organized by IK Musazi? Suppose I put the question the other way around. Why is DP and UPC still struggling to survive, including the serious restrictions? I've argued somewhere else that if you subjected NRM or FDC to the type of restrictions UPC and DP has been subjected to, they will not last for 3 months. Yeah, they will not last. So why has this party survived? The trick is very simple. The political parties which were formed during the period of Musazi had a very strong social base. They were representing significant social interests. UNC, it may have had a Protestant bias somehow, but it was a party for the small African farmer. FDC is a party for who? And NRM is a party for who? Ideologically, and it has in its constitution, NRM is supposed to be multi-ideological. Multi-ideological meaning what? Yeah. So when you look at the profile of the 29 political parties, there is the Farmers Party. I've always argued its name, Uganda Farmers Party. Do you have an organic link with the Uganda farmers? No, they don't. You have Uganda Labour Party. Do you have any organic link with the labor movement in Uganda? No. So we have political parties now without a social base, and we are proud we are in a multi-party political dispensation. So, lessons from Musazi Party: in order to organize a political party, the party you should organize must be anchored in a strong social movement. So farmers, cooperative movements, labor unions, women organizations should not shy away from being the basis for political movements as long as those political movements articulate their interests. Okay? So it is time, but in spite of time, let me end with my frustration. Hopefully you'll bear with me. The frustration I have, 1 minute, is that I wanted to sing Katumba's song Abantu Lwaki Temuyiga Ekintu Kyolina, but because of time I'll not sing. So the reason why Abantu Lwaki Temuyiga is a frustration, again intelligentsia, Makerere, and we intellectuals, we have let this country down. We have not written about people who made this country what it is. So allow me sort of concretize that. When you read the story, of course, with Musazi in particular, I still insist. Of course, with the family, one time we agreed, resources allowing, we should document a book on Musazi. There's Shepherd's book, but it's more of the cooperative movement, and Stonehouse's book. There is need for a book on Musazi from the time he was born up to now. But having said that, and also not just a book, a museum. Before he died, he was staying in a house. He had, when I visited him in '98, he was staying in a house in Ntinda. That house, if our government was serious, if it has not been broken down, it should be turned into a museum. And all artifacts of Musazi, photographs, pictures, video recordings should be in that house. so that those people who want to know who Musazi was, they should go there, not just the grave. But to conclude, Musazi was not alone in the cooperative movement. When we talk of the cooperative movement in Uganda during Musazi's period, we cannot forget Musazi's very close associates, Peter Sonko, Elieza Bwete, Bazongere, Yekosofate Nguru, Okwerede, Otemali Madi. The list is endless. So the cooperative movement should organize and celebrate all Ugandans who worked together with Musazi to make this country what it is. Lastly, also from the diaspora, of course, our struggle for independence was a combination of internal and external actors. From the diaspora, there are people we have forgotten. Every celebration, people give medals. No person has given a medal to Diana Knox. When I saw that, the role of women in the cooperative movement, you cannot talk about the cooperative movement in Uganda, especially from a gender perspective, without mentioning Diana Knox. We can't forget Shepherd, Roger Kazo, John Stenhouse, but most important, Fena Brockway. Very critical British Fabian socialists, important in the struggle for our independence. So that, and of course there was an Indian lady called Chata Pandye, who also played a critical role in the cooperative movement in Uganda. So just because of the children, sort of taken a lot of time, but to answer two questions. Why, of course, one I've already answered, the committing of suicide, there were reasons for that. But why was Musazi a nationalist? Why did he go beyond Uganda? He told me a story, and I believe this story was correct. So his father was a chief. Mwanga was arrested. Kabarega was arrested. It happened that at one moment, the two protagonists were put together under the care of Musazi's father, these two prisoners, Kabarega and Mwanga. Mwanga and Kabarega asked each other. I think it was Kabarega who asked Mwanga first, "Naye Mwanga, why lwaki twali tulwanagana instead of okwegatta tulwanyisa abazungu?" So the conversation between Mwanga and Kabarega, why they were fighting one another instead of uniting against the common enemy, the British, instilled a sense of nationalism. And from that point, Musazi knew to get rid of colonial rule, we need to be together as Ugandans. So with that, I stop my presentation. Thank you.
Can we give another round of applause to the keynote presenter and the two very, very able discussants, Irene Ovonjo Dida, who unfortunately has to leave us, and Dr. Simba Kayunga Sali. How I wish we had the minister here to listen to some of this discussion, because I was extremely hesitant to interrupt the flow. I think this is part of what we miss sometimes in our conversations, and cutting them just because of time wouldn't serve justice. So we're going to spend about the next 10 minutes, have some comments from the audience, and then after that we'll see how we move on with the program. I'm going to leave that open so that we contribute to the discussion that's already been flowing for me very, very smoothly. Okay, let me start with, I think I'm going to ask him, and have someone help me move the microphone. I don't know, from Uhuru Institute. Do you have someone who can help with the microphone? We'll start with Yona Kanyomos. Let me hand over the microphone. Could you raise the microphone a little bit? Yes.
I want to thank the three presenters for work very well done. Firstly, I want to agree with Professor Simba or
Yes.
Mr. Simba, Professor Simba. You cannot have a cooperative which has no ideological base. Cooperatives, the first ones, were formed because they were going to fight exploitation. That's why they were formed. So people should not shy away to have an ideological base in cooperatives. I know people always tell me, if you say anything, they will say, oh, you are taking us back to UPC. No. There are no cooperatives anywhere which are not aligned to socialist parties or left-wing leaning parties. They are not there. That's point number one. Point number two, I agree also that cooperatives don't need to be small. The biggest bank some time ago was Crédit Agricole in France, the largest bank in the world at one time, and it was a cooperative bank. So don't think that we will remain small, we can grow big.
That CEOs of the Uhuru Institute for Socio-Economic Development, Oxfam and Uganda Cooperative Alliance, representatives of the family of Ignatius Kangave Musazi, presenter and panelists, cooperators, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. And do not forget to do good and share with others, for with such sacrifices, God is pleased. That is found in Hebrews 13, verse 16 NIV. It is of great honor to celebrate 2018 International Day of Cooperatives and the third I.K. Musazi Memorial Lecture, remembering him as teacher. On behalf of our family, I bring you warm greetings and thank the organizers of this event. This day always reminds us of the sacrifices and investments ICAMS has made in developing Uganda and Africa. Even though history does not specifically record ICAMS as a professional teacher or a public servant, but society remembers him more as a teacher who notably managed to create a practical platform and classroom not limited with walls of geographical boundaries. He taught his local people with practical and relevant ways and the importance of growing cotton and coffee and then cooperate in sales with a purpose for better prices. He was a unique teacher who taught in various places on the African continent and beyond, and to various people, some of them more qualified than himself. For a better understanding of cooperatives, he even took a further step to invite Professor Shepard, young American PhD student in economics, whom he found in the UK to join him in the struggle to ensure the work is done professionally. On this note, I remember one of the students of Cambridge University in the UK, who came here in the 2012. He was actually doing his PhD research, and he asked me this question: Elizabeth, what was your father thinking in doing all what he did? After he read Musazi's Bible and his diary, he found such a unique person who went to England to study theology, then to cooperatives and politics. That's where Dr. Simba was saying he could not go ahead with the farmers without a platform of politics. That discussion, Professor can talk more about it. All I could tell him that my father was guided by the Holy Spirit and that he always had a vision for Uganda to grow to the level of some European countries. That's what I could answer him. But today, 6 years down the road, from the year Dr. L. Jonathan posed that question to me, I can now answer the same question differently with much confidence after a deep contemplation and more research about this great man. My father is now marked a great visionary teacher. Last year, during the lecture, the memorial lecture, the second one, the family mentioned the plan to build an institute in Kasangombe, Nakaseke district, which is IKEMSA's home village, where the farmers' cooperative movement started in the 1940s. I wish to inform you with great joy and that there is progress with this project. IKEMSA's family is excited to have been joined by both local and international intellectuals to steer up plans to build the IKEMSA's Innovation and Training Center of Excellence. We intend to lay the foundation stone in June 2019. But today, I invite you cooperators to look at cooperatives differently from a Musazi practical and a great visionary teacher perspective. If we believe in a fairer world in which wealth and resources could be equally